हम नेपाल जब जाता है हमको बहुत हंसी आता है, हम बॉर्डर क्रॉस करता है, अभी 3 बार किया। तो जब मैं क्रॉस करने वाला है, मैं अंग्रेज का फॉरेन रजिस्ट्रेशन ऑफिस में घुसा नहीं, तो हिंदुस्तान का सिपाही मेरा पीछे में दौड़ दौड़ के आ करते हैं हमको पकड़ने के लिए कि यह अंग्रेज बिना एग्जिट वीजा लेकर के जा रहा है ना। तो मेरे पास आकर के अंग्रेजी बोलना शुरू करता है, मैं अपनी हिंदी शुरू हो जाता है कि खाया हमको परेशान करता है, ये मेरा गलती थोड़ी है कि मेरा चेहरा गोरा है, ये माँ का गलती है। ये हंस के कि चले जाता है। फिर नेपाल में जब पहुंचता है वहां से कहानी शुरू हो जाता है। नेपाली सिपाही हमारे पास पकड़ने के लिए, क्योंकि मैं वीजा वाला में नहीं जा रहा है ना, हम बोलते हैं देखो थोड़ा गोरा है, ये क्या लगता है आपको, मैं तो हिंदुस्तानी है तो जाने देता है। हिंदुस्तान में अगर मैं सफेद कुर्ता पजामा पहनता है, मैं किसका शक्ल मिलता है, एक नेता है हिंदुस्तान का। आपको कोई सोच विचार है? राहुल गांधी। कितना बार मेरा एयरपोर्ट में लोग, मेरा सिपाही लोग मेरा सामान उठा करके बोलते, राहुल जी आप क्यों नहीं बोला, कहाँ आपका सिक्योरिटी, चले मैं आपको मदद करता है, एयरपोर्ट से बाहर निकलता है।
Our guest speaker today, a foreigner who is now an Indian citizen, an actor and TV anchor. I'm delighted to welcome Charles Ji, also known as Biharilal Ji. Welcome, Charles Ji. Namaste.
Oh, namaste. Great to meet you, at least online.
Yes. I'm Payal, everyone, and I'm based here in London. And we have Charles Thomson Ji, who is based in Sydney. And a little bit more about Charles Ji. He went to Bharat at the age of 13 and spent 11 years, until which he was forced to leave the country. He is a yoga teacher, an actor, an anchor, plus much more. He has acted in Marathi films, soap operas, and Hindi films, including a recent Bollywood film called Gai Hamari Mata Hai, yet to be released, which he is the lead actor. He is also an anchor in a series in a popular channel, DD Doordarshan. Plus, he is a regular moderator and guest jury in international film and literature festivals. So, the scope of work you do there. So
Yes,
let's jump into, you said you went to Bharat at the age of 13. You were just a teenager. And, my straight feeling is, what did your parents, where were your parents in this decision of yours of going to Bharat and spending so many years there? Tell us, what made you fall in love with Bharat?
Okay, so naturally at that age, obviously, one doesn't quite understand what's happening. But as I look back, now I can narrate and understand exactly what happened. So basically, I was very lucky. I lived in a very good family. We were very privileged. We've lived in some very beautiful places in Australia. And my last residence when I was a child was on the northern beaches of Sydney. We had an amazing home, and life was amazing. Now, what happened was my father was a psychiatrist. And my mother, when I was born, she was a ballerina. So I was the first child. So she had to give up ballerina. And then she thought what to do. So she started to learn yoga and she loved it. And then she became a yoga teacher. And then when I was about, I think, 11, my father decided to go to the United States to study something called transactional analysis, which is some part of psychiatry. So my mum, being very independent and also understanding, so this is in the late 60s, early 70s, to fly was incredibly expensive. To go to another country was for very few people. So my mum said, we've spent so much money on my father, now we're going to spend money on myself. So she searched and she found the largest, quietest, probably one of the most proficient yoga institutions in the world, and it's based in Bihar. So she went there for 8 weeks. And at that time, life was very simple. It's not as complicated as it is today. You didn't need visas and things were much, much easier, even though maybe it was for a few people because it was so costly. So she spent 8 weeks and she did an advanced teacher's training course in Bihar. And she met this Swami, this sadhu that she really liked in the institute. And she gave him a ticket, basically, or gave him the means for a ticket and said, come to Australia. So you can imagine, I was probably at 11 and a half. I come home one evening and I had my own room overlooking the water and it's absolutely beautiful. And I walk into my room and for the first time in my life, now I'd never met an Aboriginal, I'd never met a Chinese, I'd never met an Indian, never met a foreigner in my life. And there is a yogi in Padmasan, in a langoti, with a shaven head on my bed. So you can imagine, it aroused my curiosity to no end. And I think he stayed with us for about 6 weeks. So that is where the journey began and the powerful samskara I had about him. And I was very young, but we had some amazing experiences with him. So that sowed the seed. Now, once again, I said I was privileged because there was a reason. Every year, my parents would send me to my grandparents by aeroplane. So we would fly from Sydney to the Gold Coast. And once again, that was a very big luxury. Very few people did it. So I was thinking to myself after I met this yogi, if mum can go, why can't I? But the problem was dad's a psychiatrist and I knew dad would not say yes. So I had to think about it very carefully and think about a psychiatrist and work out a way to go forward.
Clever.
So So I said I was not doing very well academically, basically because I was too happy with my life. Swimming, sailing, fishing, doing all the things that you would do, in paradise in Australia. So I said to my father, I said, look, every year we go to the Gold Coast to meet the grandparents. How about next year you send us to India? And before he could say no, I said, but there's a condition. And he loved that. He said, what's the condition? I have to either come first or second in the school. And he naturally blubbered out, of course, thinking that it'd inspire me, but I'd never become first or second. Now, I got all the yogic books and I started my practices, and I'm only 11 and a half year old, reading about astral traveling, the Theosophical Society, all these chakras, Tibetan Book of the Dead. I was reading all these things. And my father started to get worried because he started getting reports from the school, unbeknown to me, that I was topping my sports because I was doing yoga nidra at the end of my, and then they were testing my blood pressure and everything. And I was doing incredibly well because I was doing meditation. So my retention was much higher and I was getting better marks. So my dad panicked. So what did he do? He took me out of a beautiful local government school and put me in one of the most expensive private schools in Sydney, where the brightest kids are, hoping that would be, and I had no idea about this, a barrier from me or getting first or second. And lo and behold, I think I was 12, finishing my year 12, I came second in the school. So I got my ticket for 8 weeks. So that's the beginning of the journey. So anything's possible at any time of your life if you put your mind to it, regardless of the barriers. There's always a pathway. And that has been my whole journey and my whole life, doing the impossible.
Testing the boundaries or crossing the boundaries, it looks like. So you said 8 weeks you were given. So
Absolutely.
then what happened? 8 weeks of
Yes.
spending time in Bharat,
Well,
like.
yeah. Once again, after 8 weeks, my dad turned up there in Mongia and he's ready to take me home. Now, unbeknown to me, I didn't know about his youth. And I said to my father, how about I spend a year here? And he automatically said yes. And I only found out many years later that he came from a very poor family. His father was a carpenter and a very honest man. And they were so poor that my dad had to work outside of school and his grades were very poor. So he actually failed the last year of high school. But he was also much younger than the other kids. So he had to repeat the last year of high school. He topped that. And then he went into university and he topped it all the way through. So I know in his mind, he could understand that if I spent 1 year in India, in the Gurukul, there's no problem. I'd be bright enough to catch up when I got back. So I extended that 1 year to 11 years. India decided it was my time to go. And not only me, all the foreigners in India who had anything to do with any type of yoga, Ayurvedic, Sanatan Dharma institutions, all were given two
Wow.
days' notices and told to leave, even if they'd been there 10, 15, or 20
Wow.
years.
Yeah, we're going to touch on this later,
And
aren't we?
we just had
Yes,
to
on
go.
just yeah, on this, yeah, yeah. We can
Yes,
touch on
sure.
it now. What was the story? I mean, like,
Okay, so you have to give it a bit of context. What actually happened was, see, when I first arrived, there were no visas. We were a
mm,
Commonwealth country. Then, after the death of Indira Gandhi, and it's another story and another day, I was actually next door when she got shot. I was teaching yoga to one of the Chief Justices of India. But anyway, that's another story. But what happened was, after she got shot, they had to start changing
mm,
the rules. And then, of course, the bureaucracy started to get a little bit more paranoid. And then her son became the prime minister. Uh, and unbeknown to most people, he wasn't very, how to put this diplomatically to my Congress friends, he wasn't very keen on Bharat. His heart was set living in Italy. He was forced by his mum to come over, who I'd met, Indira Gandhi I'd met twice. He was forced to come over because his younger brother had been killed or had died in a tragic accident or whatever had happened. So he found himself with his Italian wife in India amongst the Hindu community, and he really basically had converted himself to Catholicism. So up until that point, you see, Indira Gandhi, I know for a fact, practiced yoga, Veda, Rudrakshamala, was very close. I mean, she had her faults, I understand that, but she also had, one of the things was she was very proud of Indian culture. I didn't see that in Rajiv Gandhi. He was incredibly bright. There were some things he did which were incredibly good for the country. But as far as Sanatan Dharma and the Hindu culture is concerned, he just took a step back. But of course, being the prime minister of the country, he understood, so he couldn't say much about it. But then the pressure was on him, and that was one of the triggers. And I can say this now because all of these people have left us. I don't like to talk about things where people are still here. Now it's past, as past as history. So the governor of Bihar and the director general of police, who I used to stay with and teach yoga, they both came and pleaded with me that give me an application and we'll apply for Indian citizenship, because we're just about to wipe out all the foreigners in India who have anything to do with yoga, Ayurvedic, or Sanatan Dharma. But I said, no, if India doesn't want me, they'll let them throw me out. Because I was young at that time. I thought, I'm not going to force myself on this amazing country, Bharat. Okay, so yes, that's a little bit of the
wow.
history of that. So I've seen India in many shades. I even traveled on the trains as a 15-year or 16-year-old or whatever the age I was, 13 or 14, and saw the emergency. Right? That was a very dark period, and it's been forgotten. And I won't go much into that, but that was a very dark period of India. And even Indira Gandhi acknowledged that that was a great mistake. And if she had the chance again, she would have not done it.
Very well.
But it's hard to know in politics.
Actually, I'm curious. You said it was the people practicing yoga and foreigners practicing yoga, Ayurveda, etc., who had to leave. Why? Why were only them targeted?
Okay, no, so you've got to understand at
Yeah.
that time, and even now there's little bits left of it, everybody was living like a foreigner who was wealthy. When I met the senior most people of India in Delhi in their bungalows, I won't mention names, but in one house, husband and wife, very senior, they had 12 people in the kitchen cooking for
Mm.
them, three people. So we would have high tea in the afternoon and they come with their plumes and service. It was still the British Raj. In fact, you see, the British were incredibly brilliant. When they left with favors. So the people of the British Raj remained. You know, and I even chuckle today when you ask people what were the best schools, even today where people are educated. They all have saints in front of their names. No rishis, no munis. So, but then again, and I have an ancestry from Britain, by the way, so I must express that. But I will say this in the British defense: of all the colonizers in the world, they were the best of the worst. So if India had to be colonized, okay, it was the British and not one of those other countries in Europe. But still, it would have been amazing if India had not been colonized. But then again, it also would have been amazing if the circumstances had been different when Indira Gandhi was the prime minister and things weren't nationalized. And I'll just give you a short, quick example of something amazing. Before Indira Gandhi nationalized Air India, it was owned by the Tatars. It was the most profitable airline in the world. Now, imagine if it had not been nationalized and until today, the Tatars were running it. Now, the Tatars have TCS, the biggest computer group amongst all in the world. Can you imagine how many more people would be employed in Air India? What a phenomenal airline it would be, the likes of Singapore Airlines,
Yeah,
one of the best
so
in the world.
true.
So, unfortunately, in those times, under those circumstances, these things happened. But of course, the great news is it's back in the private sector and back with the
Mhm.
Tatars. So we're all waiting with a bated breath for
Finally.
their magic to take place with Air India. Yes.
So interesting, so interesting. I think you probably have so many stories to share on uh, that time.
So I try and
Yeah.
cut them so you can ask me a few more questions.
Okay, so let's move on to uh, the something that you're very passionate over, which is uh, well, you're just talking about the British and how they were one of the best colonizers, if you'd like to say. Um, but uh, the English language still so widely spoken in Bharat, a colonial language, and you're so passionate that people need to start speaking in Hindi or their native languages. Maybe you can answer this in Hindi as we are right now talking in English, and it'll be nice to hear your answer in Hindi, your passion on why this needs to happen.
Sure. Let me just for a few minutes put our mind to Great Britain. If you study the history of Great Britain, it's interesting because you learn so much about the British and why they did what they did in India. So in Great Britain, if you study its history, they used to speak many languages, just like in Europe. So even today, when you meet a European, even if they're German, they'll speak Spanish or they'll speak French also. So they're multilingual. So the question is, because UK had such a big influence on India, why today is the average POM not multilingual? And if you look back in their history, they learned very quickly that if you want to take over and you want to control a community, you have to remove their language. So the Scots, they could not speak their language. The Irish could not speak their language. So, the British learned very quickly that one of the best tools to subjugate or take over was to eradicate or put your language in predominance. So, this is the first part of it. The second part of it, which I find fascinating, is if you look at Europe, Europe has a great connection to Latin. In fact, it's so powerful. Not only was the Catholic Church, which was the church of the times, the priests only allowed to read and write in Latin, and even in early days, you could not read and write in English, you could only speak it. Uh, Latin is even till today the language of medicine. So somebody who studies through the medical pathway has to, if they don't understand Latin, there's a good chance they're not going to specialize and they're not going to be a great doctor. Now, when the British arrived in India, they found that there was one language that was given utmost importance, and that was Sanskrit. So what they very cleverly did was they uplifted Sanskrit and they put English in its place. And we even feel that till today. तो इसलिए मुझे बड़ा अजीब लगता है, अब मैं हिंदी में समझाएंगे आप लोगों को, कि अभी भी एक ही देश है पूरा दुनिया में जहां उसका सुप्रीम कोर्ट कोई भी उसका मातृभाषा में बातचीत नहीं होता है. मैं काय बड़ा बड़ा वकील हूं हिंदुस्तान का सुप्रीम कोर्ट के साथ झगड़ा हो जाता है क्योंकि वो मेरे साथ अंग्रेजी कपड़ा पहन करके, अंग्रेजी शराब पी करके मेरे साथ बैठना चाहता है। हम बोलते हैं, एक तो हम शराब पीने वाला नहीं है, दूसरा आपसे मिल करके कुर्ता पजामा क्यों नहीं पहन रहा है? कितना सुंदर है, कितना बोरिंग है सूट एंड टाई। तो ये चीज़ बड़ा अजीब चीज़ है। लेकिन एक और बड़ा प्रश्न होता है ना, लोग पूछते हैं कि चलो ठीक है, आपकी बात अगर सही भी है, आगे जाकर के जो बच्चे लोग जो नौकरी चाहता है, जो आगे बढ़ना चाहता है, उसके लिए क्या उपाय है? पूरा दुनिया तो अंग्रेजी बोलता है। गलत। कितने हिंदुस्तानी जर्मनी गया है या थाईलैंड गया है या जापान गया है और उनको ये बोला गया है कि कोई बात नहीं, आप अपना भाषा बोल दो। ठीक है? अंग्रेजी। लेकिन वहां पहुंचने के बाद पता चल गया कि सब लोग जब काम नहीं कर रहा है अपना मातृभाषा में बात करता है। एक तो फिर उसके ऊपर में एक और दूसरा प्रश्न होता है ना, आजकल अगर आप कोई भी कंपनी देखेंगे दुनिया में, जो कंपनीज आगे बढ़ रहा है वो इनोवेशन के साथ बढ़ रहा है। इनोवेशन मतलब वो टेक्नोलॉजी और नया सोच, नया विचार, जिसका नया सोच, नया विचार, नया फीचर, वो आगे बढ़ता है। अगर आप कोई भी व्यक्ति को बोल देंगे कि आप जो है ना, अपना मातृभाषा जो माँ पापा आपको बचपन में जो बोला गया है उसको बंद करो और आपको अंग्रेजी में सोच विचार करना है, तो आपको पीछे रखेगा। अभी चाइना और भारत दोनों का जगना का समय आ गया और इतना लोग है भारत में, अगर वो अपना मातृभाषा में सोच विचार करेगा, एप्लीकेशन बनाएगा ना, तो बाकी दुनिया में कितना अच्छा बात है। ये मुझे बड़ा अजीब लगता है कि हमेशा हमको झगड़ा होना पड़ता है। और अंग्रेज इतना चालाक है ना, वो बोला है, हाँ ना, अंग्रेजी जो है ना लिंक लैंग्वेज है हिंदुस्तान में। क्यों? क्या जरूरत है? अगर आप तमिल है तो आपको मलयालम आता होगा। अगर आप तेलुगु है तो तमिल आता है। आप मराठी है तो हिंदी आता है, गुजराती भी हिंदी आता है। तो मल्टीलिंगुअल रहने में क्या आपको नुकसान है? और जब सारा दुनिया में सबसे ज़्यादा मैंडरिन बोलता है, उसके बाद हिंदी, जो समझ जाता है, उसका मातृभाषा नहीं है, उसके बाद अंग्रेजी। तो क्यों हिंदी को इतना मतलब ये लोग को दबाना है, उसको पुश करना है, उसको खत्म करना है? बड़ा अजीब बात है ना? तो आप देखिए एक और भाषा है जो 4th जो 14 जो आता है ना, वो म्यूजिक में वो नंबर 1 है दुनिया में, वो कौन है? स्पेनिश। तो ये थोड़ी है कि खाली अंग्रेजी बोलने से नौकरी मिलेगा। एक छोटी सी कहानी बतलाते हैं आपको। हमारा एक दोस्त था दिल्ली में, वो एक जर्मन कार मैन्युफैक्चरर का कंपनी में काम किया था दिल्ली में, और उसका मालिक, सबसे बड़ा मालिक आया था जर्मनी से। तो उसको काम दिया था गाड़ी में बैठ करके उसको दिल्ली में घुमाओ। उनको बड़ा अजीब लगा कि उसका मालिक अंग्रेजी ठीक से नहीं आता था। तो अंत में उनसे पूछा कि सर यू कांट स्पीक इंग्लिश प्रॉपर्ली, व्हाट हैपेंड टू यू? तो वो अंग्रेजी में उसको जवाब दे दिया, शुड आई बीन अ गुड इंजीनियर एंड रन माय कंपनी और शुड आई लर्न द इंग्लिश लैंग्वेज? तो ठीक है, अंग्रेजी अच्छा मेरा मातृभाषा है, मुझे भी प्रेम है अंग्रेजी का, लेकिन जो आपका मातृभाषा है उसमें आप में दम है, शक्ति है, उसमें आप आगे बढ़ सकते हैं आपके जीवन में। और ये मेरा सिर्फ बात नहीं है, गूगल को लोग जानता है, एप्पल को लोग जानता है ना, इसलिए ये सब अपना एप्लीकेशंस को मल्टीलिंगुअल बना दिया ना। जब बाकी क्योंकि मैं बहुत टोपी पहना है, हिंदुस्तान में भी स्टार्टअप्स में भी काम किया और मुझे भी अपना सीईओ के साथ झगड़ा हो गया। वो बोल रहा है सबको अंग्रेजी बोलना है। बोले, भाई ये दिमाग खराब कर रहा है, ये अंग्रेजी बोलना है। ठीक है, नेक्स्ट दूसरा प्रश्न पूछ लीजिए।
I was just thinking it's so true what you just said. I understood you. I'm sorry, I can't, my Hindi isn't yet not so great to respond. But I'm an educator, and what I always feel is children, they feel sometimes like they can be extremely intelligent, just say that they're brilliant in science, brilliant in other things, but if they don't know English, and this happens also here in the UK, where there's if they've come from another country, or then you're deemed to feel unintelligent, right? Just because you don't know English, and this happens in Bharat. So you can be brilliant in every subject. But if you don't know how to speak, learn that, or have the medium of English, you're considered as not knowing. So this is something which I observed in Bharat, and I also feel for the children who sometimes find it difficult to learn because they don't know English, although they can be extremely bright, right? I'm also so passionate over this. It's so important to take this message out. So beautifully said.
Well, let me talk about another colony,
Yeah,
Australia. After all, we were also started, they came here, knocked off all the local indigenous people and put a whole lot of convicts and other people. So in Australia, we also had this misunderstanding up until about 30 years ago that everybody should just speak English. And when the first wave of migrants started coming to Australia, we made it push them to learn English, but we also made sure that their children who were born here only spoke English. And then we started to observe that these children, even though they were very bright, were having problems because if they go back to their home country to meet their grandparents, or Australia as a nation would try to connect with the rest of Southeast Asia, we were limited very much because we were not multilingual and we could only speak English. So this became a hindrance. So Australia started something called the Colombo Plan, which is absolutely amazing. And I love to pinpoint this because I hit the Ministry of External Affairs hard on this issue. The Colombo Plan, what they do is 160 of the brightest young students from all over the universities in Australia are chosen. And then they are given a scholarship, which is worth of something to the tune of $70,000. They don't get in the pocket, but it's the cost. This scholarship allows them for 1 year during their university bachelor's degree to go to a country in Southeast Asia and spend 6 months to learn their language there and 6 months to get work experience in that country, right? Because we understand that unless our younger citizens can speak Korean, Japanese, Thai, Indonesian, we will not adjust and we will not progress in the future in Southeast Asia. But then there comes the question, one would obviously think, and Australia would obviously think, that let's say Hindi, because it's such a big language in India, that people would be enrolling to go for it for Hindi. But this is where it gets comical. Diplomats, and I'm just going to digress for a moment. Diplomats are people who are very bright academically. And to become a diplomat of any country, you have to be incredibly bright. And normally you learn a second language. Every diplomat knows that when they get a posting in a new country, so if an Indian goes to France or a German comes to Australia, you learn that language or you start learning that language, right? And this is normal everywhere in the world, except for one capital. And can we guess which capital of the world that is? New Delhi. What happens when a diplomat arrives in New Delhi and tries to learn Hindi? What are they told by the local officials, the Ministry of External Affairs? No need, we speak English. ये क्या दिमाग है दिल्ली का। लेकिन इसमें अब नया बात जो मुझे बड़ा अच्छा लगता है और मैं उसको याद दिलाना चाहता है, थोड़ा चिकी बात है। प्रधानमंत्री और जो गृह मंत्री है ना, दिल्ली में रह करके अपना मातृभाषा गुजराती है, लेकिन हिंदी बोलता है। जो मुख्यमंत्री है दिल्ली का और उनका जो नंबर 2 मंत्री है ना फाइनेंस और एजुकेशन का, वो भी हिंदी बोलता है। लेकिन एक और पुराना पार्टी जो है ना, उनसे हम जब भी मिलता है और उन लोग से मिलता है, वो सब अंग्रेजी में बात करता है। तो कांग्रेस से मेरा प्रार्थना है कि आप अंग्रेजी छोड़ो। थोड़ा-थोड़ा हिंदी में बात करना शुरू
yeah,
करो दिल्ली में। नहीं तो दोनों मुख्यमंत्री और प्रधानमंत्री उन लोग के साथ आप कभी नहीं जीत पाएगा।
absolutely.
I'm tongue in cheek in there, and I do say it to them, by the way.
Good. Very good. It's needed to be said as much as possible, and I think it does have more emphasis when it's said from someone who is not who is a foreigner or looks like a foreigner. We'll discuss that later on whether you actually are anymore. But so, shall we move on?
So no, but I'll
Yeah,
give you
go.
a fact. I've been into the Australian High Commission in
Yeah.
New Delhi, dealt with all the staff in Hindi, and none of the diplomats have any idea what's going on. Done all my work and left. Right? They should learn the basic Hindi, but that's not their fault. Ministry of External Affairs has to start speaking regional languages. You see, if you meet most of these retired ambassadors from India and everything, they've done a course in French, in German,
Mm, that,
no Hindi, no Sanskrit, no regional
mm.
language. Sorry to
Oh,
interrupt.
that's
Please, your
yeah.
next
Next question.
question.
No, but yeah, you're so right on that. So yeah, let's move slightly out of Bharat and talk about Sanatan Dharma in I think more in the eastern
Sure.
countries, right? And your findings, because I know you
Mm,
have some very interesting observations. You were saying about
mm.
one thing which
Yes.
struck me when we had a conversation was about the Brahma. Brahma actually being there's sort of like a murti of Brahma in other parts. Yeah, what's your findings?
Oh, okay. So if we're talking about the Indian
Mm,
gods, what is so amazing in Thailand, and I was also in Laos this time, in every
mm,
district, they have a temple to Lord
mm,
Brahma. One. Two, in most of the ancient Buddhist temples, although now they're being removed for some political correct reason, you will find a giant Ganesha.
mm,
Three, they have temples in Thailand with the largest Ganeshas in the world and 108 different types of
mm,
Ganeshas. I was staying at a friend's, let's call it a farmhouse by the river, 2 hours from Bangkok, in a beautiful, there's coconut palms, rice fields, and everything. And overtowering me was the largest Ganesha in the world. I'm a great fan of Ganesha, by the way. I'm very
and
biased
we
with him.
all.
The whole concept of removing moving obstacles is just brilliant. Whenever I have a problem, just pray to Lord Ganesha,
Mm,
remove the obstacles, and we just go
mm,
forward. I think it's great,
I love it
right?
too.
Yeah. So you see the thing. I think see what's not. So there are two parts to this. One, in the whole of Southeast Asia, Hinduism flourished, and there are still amazing remnants of it. There's a place called Ayutthaya in Thailand. It used to be the ancient capital, and it used to be the hub of the whole of Southeast Asia, and it got its name from Ayodhya,
Mm, mm,
right? Now, what's so fascinating there is if you ever get a chance in December, January, I don't know about this COVID last period, but December, January, they have a laser light festival like nothing on the planet. And they have like, 700 people and 10 elephants and a few real white elephants with tusks. And they show the Burmese invading Thailand and it's taking over Ayutthaya. And then the Thais once again capturing it and taking the Burmese out. Once they've done that, before the Buddhist monks enter the temples, they bring the Sanskrit chanting Brahmin priests from India to purify the temples with their chanting.
incredible.
When the king of Thailand is anointed, they have to bring the water from the river Ganges to put on him. So these are extraordinary parts. So that's one aspect that's very much I see, I enjoy, and is living proof that Hinduism flourished, across the whole of Southeast Asia, and it's had a huge impact on people's way of life, their thinking, and it's also had a profound impact on
Mm,
Buddhism, which is the predominant. Um, faith in many
mm.
countries.
Those are, your insights there are very new to me, and I haven't traveled, I'll be honest, to some parts of the Far East yet. But next time I go, I will definitely look out for those. I think it's just a reminder that of what the past was, right? And you know, there was a place for Sanatan Dharma in those Eastern countries, which may, I guess, Buddhism, it's on the branch of Sanatan Dharma anyway, right? Uh,
Yes,
so
absolutely.
it's I guess it does make sense.
Let me explain the connection between
Mm,
the two and how, in my humble opinion, and I'm no priest or authority or great pundit on these things or studied these things, but what I find, you see, in Buddhism, we have something called the precepts, which are, voluntary rules that one follows. But I think one of the greatest aspects for me in Sanatana Dharma is the learning of self
mm,
discipline. Now, what do I mean by that? You see, in a country like Australia, we have great community discipline, but we're not taught self discipline. What does self discipline mean? It means the ability to say no when you want to say no and not participate in
mm,
something. Now, that could be anything. That could be in the food that you eat. You might decide to be a vegetarian, a vegan, or you might decide not to drink or not to smoke. So, this is one of the things which is a very powerful uh, construct in
mm,
Sanatan Dharma. Unfortunately, what happens in the other sort of biblical Judo Christian faiths is the way it's taught as a community. So you have this bizarre situation where somebody might say to you, look, I don't participate in this, but behind closed doors they do.
mm,
Now, when you learn it in the Sanatana pathway, what you're learning about is you do it for yourself and for your upliftment, not just to show off to the rest of
mm,
community. And this is an amazing tool. And because of this amazing tool that we learn on this pathway, I'll just give you a couple of examples. So in Australia or New Zealand, or maybe even in the UK, I'm not too sure about the UK. I'll come and
okay.
visit and I'll find out. But definitely in Australia and New Zealand, if you get up really early in the morning at sunrise and appreciate the sun and go along any of our beaches, you'll find young Australian women with a yoga mat.
Mm,
Now, what's this? They're able, even though they've got a family and kids, that they've got enough self discipline to get up early in the morning before the family wakes up and go and practice
mm,
yoga. Now, the question, of course, then is why bother practicing something like yoga? Because it's a tool that we can use in our life to improve the quality of our
mm,
life. So, what's I find interesting is that in the West, so many people live in beautiful homes. They might have gone through university, they're very well off, but then they're at a point where they want to improve their quality of existence. And yoga's that tool. And this tool has been growing since the
mm,
1940s across the
mm,
West. So, what I always find surprised, and many of my Indian Australian friends admit to me, the first time they've done a yoga class is when कोई गोरा उसको पकड़ के लेके गया था.
so true.
So, so this is, this business about, and so once you understand this principle about self-discipline, all this nonsense that gets hyped up in the media about far right, far left, and everything, it all goes out the
Mm,
door. Think about it. If you are a vegetarian because you don't want to harm
mm,
animals, if you don't drink, and this is your choice, because you don't want to lose that state of consciousness that which you have,
mm,
how are you possibly even contemplating of creating harm for another human being,
mm,
right?
absolutely.
So it's a pathway to complete
Mm,
non-violence in a very positive
mm,
way, right? So, and I will add here that I have traveled the length and breadth of
mm,
India, and I rarely have ever come across problems.
mm,
There have been difficulties, I will admit, but by that I mean violence. If somebody has been difficult to me, if I've shown a positive attitude, I've shown them respect, they've calmed down, and we've had a wonderful
mm,
experience. And this is really important that we learn not to teach our children to become victims, this victimhood
mm,
status. We have to learn that it's our life, our existence, and it's our self-discipline that creates us. And once we go on this path, then what if we choose a different path, we can do it. Think about it. I left school at the age of 13. But if you go through my LinkedIn profile, I've done everything. I've broken every rule and done every type of career path that I've wanted in my life. Right?
Free spirit.
How is that possible? Through the practice of
Yeah,
self-discipline.
that's so true. Incredible. You talk just now about the far right and just how, what I have noticed, especially in the news here in the West, and I know it's probably the case in some of the news in India as well, in Bharat too. Um, they they use words like Hindu nationalism or Hindutva in a very extreme kind of comparing it to fundamentalist Islam or whatever way. And, it bothers me. They sometimes write beautiful articles about, I don't know, British Hindus since the new Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak's come in place, for example. So I've seen some articles recently. But they always have to throw in one line about Hindu nationalists. And in a kind of negative and add a negative tone. What would you say? What's your view on this? Like, why do journalists feel the need to do this?
मैं इसको हिंदी में जवाब देंगे। कहाँ से आया और कौन किया? ये सब हिंदुस्तानी एनआरआई है,
Hmm.
लुटियंस वाला। क्योंकि देखिए, मैं एक चीज आपको समझाना चाहता है। मान लीजिए मैं लुटियंस दिल्ली वाला हूँ, इसका मतलब क्या है? मैं शराब पीता है, मांस मछली सब कुछ खा लेता है, योगा नहीं करता है, आयुर्वेदा नहीं करता है, अंग्रेज का कपड़ा पहनता है, अंग्रेज का जीवन रहता है। फिर मैं उठ करके विदेश में चले जाता है, ब्रिटेन में जाता है, ऑस्ट्रेलिया में जाता है, और मैं कोई लेफ्ट विंग वाला से मिलता है वहां पर, और लेफ्ट विंग वहां पर वेजिटेरियन है, योगा करता है, शराब नहीं पीता है, तो मैं थोड़ा पागलपन हो जाता है कि अंग्रेज क्या कर रहा है। तो जो लेफ्ट लीनिंग हिंदुस्तानी है ना, वो जब विदेश जाता है वो काफी कंफ्यूज हो जाता है, जैसे ऐसा कोरानो को मिल जाता है। तो तो वो अपना स्थान को मजबूत बनाने के लिए ये सब चीज शुरू हो की जाता है ना। आप सोचो, मैं एक बात बतलाता है। बीबीसी हिंदी 370 हटाने के बाद एक लड़की एक बहुत ऐसा आर्टिकल लिखा था जम्मू कश्मीर और लद्दाख के बारे में। ये आर्टिकल जब आप पढ़ेंगे ना, वो मैं नीचे में इसको कमेंट्स दे दिया कि आपको लगेगा कि सारा जम्मू कश्मीर और लद्दाख जो था JNK उस समय वो खाली श्रीनगर में है, और वो भी 2-3 शहर है। मतलब जम्मू नहीं था, लेह लद्दाख नहीं था, बाकी जगह नहीं था। और नीचे में उनका नाम पढ़ने से हम समझ गए कि वो पंडित है, लड़की है ना। तो उसका मतलब क्या है? उसका मतलब है उनको मालूम था ये सब चीज था, लेकिन खिलाफ में क्यों लिखा? अगर अच्छा चीज लिखा छपवाएगा नहीं ना। तो मीडिया में हम लोग को समझना चाहिए ना कि मीडिया को वायरल करने के लिए हमेशा सबसे आसान है कि किसी के खिलाफ में, किसी का बदनाम करने में सबसे आसान है बोलने में, और ये मीडिया का काम है। लेकिन हाँ, मैं इंडियन स्टूडेंट्स हमसे पूछता है, क्योंकि मैं जी में काम किया, दूरदर्शन में, एशियन कई राजनीतिक वहाँ पर कवर किया है, अपना ऑटो वाला बाबू पूरा दिल्ली म्यूनिसिपैलिटी चुनाव। तो वो पूछता है कि हम लोग क्या करेंगे? तो हम बोलता है कि पिछले जब चुनाव हुआ था ना, तो प्रधानमंत्री जी नरेंद्र मोदी काशी गया था, ठीक है? क्योंकि वो उनका कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंसी है। तो वो क्या किया था, किसी उसके साथ नहीं गया था, खाली एक दूरदर्शन का व्यक्ति तो कैमरा लेकर के उसको फिल्म कराया था। तो एनडीटीवी और रिपब्लिक इंडिया दोनों सेम दिखलाया था कि नरेंद्र मोदी प्लेन में बैठ करके बनारस में पहुंच गए और घूम रहा है, लेकिन कॉमेंट्री एकदम अलग था। एनडीटीवी बोल रहा है विकास नहीं हुआ, सब लोग परेशान है, नौकरी नहीं है, जगह गंदा है। रिपब्लिक बोल रहा है विकास हो गया। तो ये दुनिया का खेल है। अब सोशल मीडिया आ गया ना, तो सोशल मीडिया में ऐसे चीज लिखता है तो लोग विश्वास नहीं कर सकता है। अब सोचो, मैं दिल्ली में था अभी कुछ महीने पहले, 3 महीने में अभी इस साल में रहा, तो मैं दिल्ली में था। तो मैंने एक आर्टिकल पढ़ा था ऑस्ट्रेलिया में कि दिल्ली में क्लाइमेट चेंज की वजह से अब लोग स्ट्रीट्स में मर रहा है, रात को उनको नींद नहीं आ रहा है और उनका पाइप जो है ना गर्म पानी निकाल रहा है और सब परेशान है। तो मुझे थोड़ा सोचना पड़ा कि मेरे पास ऐसे ही नहीं था, एक कूलर था, हम भी दिल्ली में हैं हम भी रह रहा है, हमको कहाँ कुछ फर्क लग रहा है। हाँ ठीक है, इस साल का गर्मी थोड़ा पहले से शुरू किया ना, लेकिन उसको ऐसा लिखने से लोग घबरा जाता था। फिर हम ऑस्ट्रेलिया वापस आया और मेरा जो पुराना दोस्त लोग है वियोन वो लोग एक बनाया था कि ऑस्ट्रेलिया में अब ऑस्ट्रेलिया से सब जा रहा है बुश फायर्स के कारण से, किसी सब फ्लड्स का, यहाँ भी बुश फायर्स होता है, फ्लड्स हो रहा है, लेकिन पूरे देश जा रहा है और किसी को अपना घर का इंश्योरेंस नहीं मिल रहा है, किसी को ऐसे तकलीफ है, लेकिन मुझे कोई तकलीफ नहीं मेरा आसपास में कोई बुश फायर नहीं, मेरे पास कोई फ्लड नहीं है, लेकिन ऐसे डिक्लेयर है कि सारे देश को होगा। तो मीडिया का काम है ना चिल्लाना और गड़बड़ करना है वही इसका काम है ना
Absolutely. So, in a nutshell, ignore what the media says because it's always going to be,
It's not about
yeah,
ignoring. What I would say to you is, it's really
yeah,
good to try and watch. If there's something that interests you that's happening in India or happening in the UK, try and find two channels which are directly opposed to each other, and then listen to both of them, and then form your
yes.
view. Because quite often, sometimes the left is right, sometimes the right is right. But then you get a far more balanced view, and you understand why people think both ways. So that's incredibly important. And of course, the biggest issue, I think, for all journalists is a journalist should be able to produce their product without the audience feeling a bias or knowing which party they elect, which they vote for.
Very true.
But that's not easy. That's a hard call.
I feel in today's day, this sense of buddhi, what we call your discernment, your discrimination, that is now proving to be, a tool that we all have to learn, right? In respect to really seeking the truth of what the media is trying to say, or someone's trying to has put on social media somewhere. I just feel we all have to take a step back and always not just take things, as face value, like you said, and you have to definitely take in as much and be
Mm.
so unattached to your viewpoint, and allow that to kind of keep evolving, right? So that you do come as close to the truth as possible of whatever the question is that's been asked. So that's something, as an educator, I really
Yes.
feel like our children need to really work on, and teachers, educators need to kind of bring
Yes.
as a important tool to, or something which should be in conversation a lot in schools as well. On this, I wanted to ask
Yes.
you just very quickly, to the youth, um, what is your definition of Hindutva? You can say this in Hindi.
Okay. Finding oneself and understanding oneself and motivating oneself. You see, but just before I go there, I just want to touch on one more thing there. I think the youth of today have to learn, with all this extraordinary amount of information coming to them, how to switch off. So even though for me it's very
Very
difficult,
true.
but I try every night. When I put my phone down, I don't touch it till the next morning, right? So we have to learn from time to time how to switch off some of the platforms that are giving us information. One of the things that I did in Australia was I don't watch any of the news channels here. I just don't watch them. I have Netflix, Amazon Prime, and a bit of YouTube, and that's it. And I watch what I like to watch. I was really impressed. I was in Delhi with a pundit's family, and they were telling me that during COVID, he noticed that his parents and his children and his wife were getting very depressed. So he brought in a policy that during COVID, no one was allowed to watch the news. And he said from almost within 3 or 4 days, the whole family's lightened up and everybody became happy again. So that's
Absolutely.
really, really important. Now, coming back to your question, for me, there's something we call sadhana. Now, what is sadhana? Sadhana is just a basic, some simple practices that you would do every morning. Once again, you can learn them through the yogic pathway. And these are a tool not only to calm your mind, but to improve your body immunity. And when you are calmer, less angry, have more energy, then you're just a much better human being. So, Sanatan Dharma, or this whole idea, is to make ourselves a better human being amongst others. You know, time and time again in my life, I've been in contact with somebody who I had no idea was a hardcore criminal, even in India. But because of my nature and because of the way I treated them, that never became an issue. In fact, they became my friend.
Mhm.
So the way we interact with other people, it's really important that behind that we have the tools to be able to have a strong immune system, not get as angry, and also be healthy and just have a lot of energy. I've been practicing yoga since the age of 11, and it's the greatest gift I've ever got because 7 days a week, now I'm 61, I've got so much energy.
I can tell.
And I just to give a bit of scientific basis to that, Harvard University did a study and found that if just once in your lifetime you sit down, close your eyes, and do a simple meditation, it actually has a permanent impact on the brain. So imagine doing that every day.
Incredible. So true. Can I just repeat the question on Hindutva? Can you give your definition just in one line, maybe in Hindi, if possible?
देखिए मैंने इसके बारे में मैंने बहुत खुशी से भारत गया, मैं भारत
Mm,
भक्त हूँ। मुझे ये हिंदू तत्व जब इसका शब्द सुनता है कि कोई झगड़ा करना चाहता है, वो भी कोई नेता है, तो मैं अपना कान बंद करता है। क्योंकि देखिए मैं हिंदुस्तान में खाली हिंदू के साथ नहीं रहता है, मुसलमान के साथ रहता है, सबके साथ रहता है। और मुझे ये इतना बड़ा दिक्कत नहीं है। ठीक है, कोई-कोई इंडिविजुअल व्यक्ति थोड़ा परेशान करता है, गलत काम करता है, लेकिन बाकी लोग तो सब खुश है, सब ठीक है, चल रहा है, अपना जीवन में आगे बढ़ रहा है ना। तो वो मुझे मुझे भारत भक्त है, मुझे योगा करने से बेहतर ये लोग जो इसका गाली दे रहा है, गाली देने दो। लेकिन हाँ, एक बात हम आपको स्पष्ट बतलाता है, मैं कभी ज़बरदस्ती किसी को बतलाता नहीं है मेरा विचार और मेरे धर्म के बारे में। तो मुझे ये दिखता है कि हमेशा 6 महीने के बाद जब ऑस्ट्रेलिया में है, विदेशों में घूम रहा है या हिंदुस्तान में है, अगर कोई भी व्यक्ति हमसे मिलता है, तो 6 महीने के बाद वो एक प्रश्न पूछेगा, "आप कौन-से धर्म को फ़ॉलो करता है? क्या दवाई ले रहा है? हमेशा इतना एनर्जी कहाँ से आ रहा है?" तो तब अच्छा संस्कार उसके पास पहुँचा सकता है क्योंकि अंत में अच्छा संस्कार अपने बच्चों को पहुँचाना है। ये सबसे ज़रूरी चीज़ है जीवन में। अगर आप अच्छे संस्कार अपने बच्चे को पहुँचा सकते हैं ना, तो आपका काम, आपका रोल जो पेरेंट है ना, वो आपने किया है। ये बहुत ज़रूरी है।
yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Totally resonates with me completely. I think values and you just doing the things you're doing every day to just live up to your dharma, right? And you're a role model in your
Exactly.
everyday reactions, responses, behaviors to people, and people see that and your energy, your aura. So I think just working on
Mm.
yourself, I think, is the your proof of what Sanatan Dharma can offer. If you're doing the right things instead of just talking about
Yes.
it, which a lot of people do, just talk about it and not really work on
Mm.
themselves. So powerful, really powerful. So finally, let's go back to the circle of you were talking initially about you were kicked out. Well, you had to leave India, leave Bharat after 11 years, and but now you said you're in Sydney, but you do have Indian citizenship, as far as you expressed.
भारत नागरिक था। हाँ, इसको हम थोड़ा लोग को स्पष्ट कहना
Yeah.
चाहता है। भारत नागरिकता प्राप्त करने में सबसे मुश्किल नागरिकता मुझे लगता है पूरा दुनिया में। वो सीएए है जो सब लोग बोल रहे हैं बकवास है। हिंदुस्तान में 3 सरकार है। एक आपका जिला अधिकारी, डिस्ट्रिक्ट मैजिस्ट्रेट, वो भी एक वहाँ छोटू बाबू रहता है, अपना मैंशन में रहता है और अपना पूरा अलग नियम है, अलग दुनिया है। एक प्रदेश है, उसका राजधानी, वो लोग भी सोचता है कि मैं महान हूँ, वो भी अपना नियम रखता है। और एक दूसरा राजधानी है दिल्ली में, वो भी अपना अलग-अलग सोच विचार है। तो भारत नागरिकता प्राप्त करने के लिए हमको 4 साल का तपस्या करना पड़ा दिल्ली में। कम से कम 100 आईपीएस आईएएस ऑफिसर, 2 मंत्री, 2 मेंबर ऑफ पार्लियामेंट, तब हुआ। क्योंकि मैं किसी को कुछ देने वाला नहीं हूँ। मैं तो कभी कोई काम ऐसा नहीं करेगा, कोई मांगे तो मैं नहीं देगा, आप थाने में डालो मुझे, मैं नहीं देने वाला है किसी को। तो ये बहुत ही मुश्किल चीज था और मेरे लिए बहुत जरूरत था, क्योंकि ठीक है, मोदी का बीजेपी ने काफी सुविधा, काफी काम किया है ना इमिग्रेशन में, वीजा लॉज में, लेकिन अभी भी बहुत काम बाकी है, बहुत। कोई भी अंग्रेज हिंदुस्तान जाना और रहना चाहता है। और मैं एक बात बतलाता आपको, मैं जब भी कोई अंग्रेज जो मेरा जैसा भारत भक्त है हिंदुस्तान में, जब थोड़ा बातचीत चलता है ना, हमें जैसे हिंदुस्तानी हमेशा हमसे पूछे आपका शादी हुआ है क्या, तो अंग्रेज का प्रश्न ये होगा, आप कौन सा वीजा में है, कितने दिन से है, कैसे मिला है। मैं तो परेशान हो गया वीजा देख करके, ठीक है। तो मैंने सोचा कि चलो इस बार हम नागरिकता लेंगे, कभी भी मन है आ सकता है, कभी भी मन है जा सकता है। कोई भी मंत्री जी है वो हमको निकालना चाहता है, वो बहुत मुश्किल होगा।
Incredible. Yeah, I just find it really fascinating that you made that decision. But does that make it difficult for you to go to Australia then, if you now have a if you have Indian citizenship?
देखिए, मैं एक छोटा सा बात बतलाता है। मैं बोला आपको कि मैं 13 साल की उम्र में स्कूल छोड़ के चले गया। इसका मतलब मेरे दिमाग जो है ना, बहुत ज़्यादा खाली है। जिसके दिमाग बहुत ज़्यादा खाली है, इसमें और भी चीज़ डाल सकता है। अभी इस उम्र में भी जगह है चीज़ डालने के लिए, एक। दूसरी चीज़ है, यहाँ एक प्रधानमंत्री था, वो एक बहुत अच्छा बात बोला। वो 15 साल स्कूल छोड़ के चले गया, एक रॉक ग्रुप स्टार्ट किया, उसके बाद में प्रधानमंत्री। वो जब भी कोई काम करता है ना, वो हमेशा उनका सोच विचार ये है ना कि बाकी लोग से वो कम जानता है, बाकी लोग से इतना पढ़ा लिखा नहीं है, तो इसलिए कोई भी काम करेगा ना, तो उसको बहुत गहराई से उसको देखना पड़ता है, उसको समझना पड़ता है। मुझे लगता है आज मुझे सबसे ज़्यादा हिंदुस्तान वीज़ा सिस्टम के बारे में जानकारी है, वो किसी से कोई मेरे सामने में नहीं आ सकता है। अच्छा, आप ऑस्ट्रेलिया के बारे में पूछ रहा है, मुझे बहुत अच्छा से इसको, क्योंकि मैं बचपन में बिहार में ना एक संस्था में मैं सखा के साथ थप्पड़, कागज-वागज, तो यहाँ का पूरा सिस्टम मैं अच्छे से जानता है। और मैं एक 2-3 नियम रखता है, एक तो हमेशा सही लिखता है, सही बोलता है और उसको बहुत अच्छा से प्रेज़ेंट करता है ना। ठीक है, हमको थोड़ा-सा ये दिक्कत होता है कि ऑस्ट्रेलियन पासपोर्ट जब देख कर के विदेशों में घूमता है, उसमें थप्पड़ लगता है, हमको वीज़ा अप्लाई करना पड़ा। लेकिन ठीक है, वो तो है, लेकिन मैं भूटान आराम से जा
Mm.
सकता है। जितना दिन रहना चाहता है हिंदुस्तान में आराम से रह सकता है। हाँ, नेपाल, हम नेपाल जब जाता है हमको बहुत हँसी आता है। हम बॉर्डर क्रॉस करता है, अभी 3 बार किया। तो जब मैं क्रॉस करने वाला है, मैं अंग्रेज का फॉरेन रजिस्ट्रेशन ऑफिस में घुसा नहीं, तो हिंदुस्तान का सिपाही मेरा पीछे में दौड़ के आ करते हैं हमको पकड़ने के लिए कि यह अंग्रेज बिना एग्जिट वीजा लेकर के जा रहा है ना। तो मेरे पास आकर के अंग्रेजी बोलना शुरू करता है, मैं अपनी हिंदी शुरू हो जाता है कि क्या हमको परेशान करता है, ये मेरा गलती थोड़ी है कि मेरा चेहरा गोरा है, ये माँ की गलती है। ये हंस के चले जाता है। फिर नेपाल में जब पहुंचता है, वहां से कहानी शुरू हो जाता है। नेपाली सिपाही हमारे पास पकड़ने के लिए, क्योंकि मैं वीजा वाला में नहीं जा रहा है ना, हम बोलते हैं देखो थोड़ा गोरा है, ये क्या लगता है आपको, मैं तो हिंदुस्तानी है तो जाने देता है।
Oh, so funny.
अच्छा, आखिरी वाला, दिल्ली में मैं काहे बार अपने नागरिक को तो सामने दे लिया, ठीक है, वापस आने के समय हमारा चेहरा देख करके उसको खोल करके उसके मन में आ गया कि ये फज है, ये असली नहीं है। तो मैं कुछ नहीं बोला, मैं चुप, एक भी शब्द हिंदी नहीं बोला। वो जाकर के पीछे में जाकर के चेक किया कि ये असली है कि नहीं, ये फज पासपोर्ट नहीं है। जब वापस आता है, मैं अपना भाषण हिंदी में शुरू हो जाता है, क्यों लेके गया, फज सोच रहा, नहीं 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 माफी मांगना, पहचानता नहीं है न्यूज चैनल पे है।
So funny.
तो वीज़ा ये सब चीज़ नियम की चीज़ है। अब नियम के साथ पालन करेगा, गलती नहीं करेगा तो हो जाता है, दिमाग लगाना पड़ता है।
Incredible. I'm sure you have so many funny stories with your situation. I can just imagine, and your sense of humor is just great.
तो हाँ, आखिरी बात, आपको मालूम है सिर्फ़ हिंदुस्तान में नहीं, जब मैं अंग्रेज का कपड़ा पहन कर के घूमता है, हिंदुस्तान में, थाईलैंड में, लाओस में, सब सोचते हैं मिस्टर बीन जा रहा है। और वो ब्रिटेन का मिस्टर बीन है और हिंदुस्तान में बच्चे लोग आकर के आर यू मिस्टर बीन बोलते डोंट टेल एनीवन आई एम हिज ब्रदर ही कांट स्पीक हिंदी मैं हिंदी आराम से बोल सकता है पूरा गांव खुश हो जाता है मिस्टर बीन का भाई आ गया हिंदी भी आता है सारा देश खुश हो जाता है उसका वजह से ना हमको लाओस में मेरा वकील थाईलैंड का और उसका पत्नी हमको लेके गया था सरप्राइज लाओस में घुमाने के लिए तो लाओस में हम लोग एक नेशनल पार्क में गया तो वहां पर लाइन लग गया मेरे साथ तस्वीर लगने में तो मेरा वकील थाई क्योंकि मैं थाई भाषा भी आता है उसे ये क्या चल रहा है ये सब सोचता है कि मिस्टर बेन के साथ तस्वीर ले रहा है
That's so funny.
आखिरी जो और भी मजेदार है हिंदुस्तान में अगर मैं सफेद कुर्ता पजामा पहनता है मैं किसका शक्ल मिलता है एक नेता है हिंदुस्तान का आपको कोई सोच विचार है
Uh, well,
राहुल
yeah.
गांधी कितना बार मेरा एयरपोर्ट में लोग मेरा सिपाही लोग मेरा सामान उठा करके बोलते राहुल जी आप क्यों नहीं बोला कहाँ आपका सिक्योरिटी चले मैं आपको मदद करता है एयरपोर्ट से बाहर निकलता है
Charles, gee, I've lost
कितना
you.
बार बॉम्बे
So,
और दिल्ली में मैं फंक्शन में जा रहा है मेरे पास निमंत्रण है हम इस्तेमाल करने की जरूरत नहीं थोड़ा चेहरा गुस्सा बनाए सफेद कुर्ता पजामा पहना अंदर गए कोई हाथ राहुल गांधी पर कोई हाथ नहीं लगाएगा मैं कभी मिला नहीं है राहुल जी से कभी मिलने की जरूरत नहीं है लेकिन मैं उसको बहुत दूर से धन्यवाद देता है कि वो भी मेरे लिए दरवाजा उसका पापा हमको निकाल दिया और वो हमारे लिए सारा दरवाजा खोल दिया हिंदुस्तान में
so funny.
तो उनको राजनीति में छोड़ना नहीं है उनको रहना है राष्ट्रपति कांग्रेस का कृपया करके राहुल जी जाओ मत मेरे लिए बहुत अच्छा काम है आपके लिए आप मुझे देता है ना
I love it. I love it. Wow. This has been such an interesting and fun interview, actually. Thank you, Charles G. Do you have any concluding remarks to make before we end?
और पहले हिंदी में बच्चे लोग हमको देवनागरी में लिखता है चेहरा किताब मैं किसी को हिंदुस्तान वाला लोग जो हिंदी अच्छे से जानता है बोलता है चेहरा किताब कोई समझ में नहीं आता है चेहरा किताब फेसबुक तो हम हमेशा चेहरा किताब में हम जहां भी घूमता है दुनिया में उसमें तस्वीर डालता है बोलता है मैं ये इधर हूँ तो मैं यूके भी आ रहा है ना कोई हमसे मिलना चाहता है मैं तस्वीर डालता है चेहरा किताब में मेरा खोज दो मार्क जुकरबर्ग हमको बहुत मदद किया सबसे आगे में हमको पहुंचा दिया कि बहुत फॉलोअर्स है उसमें तो मैं भी आप लोग से मिलेंगे क्योंकि मैं भी खुद चाहता है कि मैं वहाँ यूके में हिंदुस्तानी में शाकाहारी है ना हिंदुस्तान थाली खाएंगे हिंदुस्तान भोजन खाएंगे हाँ, लीची चोखा मिलेगा तो बड़ा अच्छा है लीची चोखा यहाँ नहीं मिलता है ऑस्ट्रेलिया में पानी पूरी मिल जाता है लीची चोखा नहीं मिलता है वो देखना पड़ेगा कि यूके में लीची चोखा मिलेगा कि नहीं आपने कभी खाया है लीची चोखा
Yes, I have. Here in
आप खाया
the
वाह
UK, you
और
get
पानी पूरी
everything.
ओह अच्छा अच्छा लीची चोखा बाकी सब चीज गरम गरम जलेबी सब कुछ
Yeah.
यहाँ पहुंच के अभी रेस्टोरेंट्स में लीची चोखा नहीं पहुंचा है जो सबसे गरीब लोग का भोजन
So, thank you so much, Charles G. This has been, like I said, really fun, and I would like to just end it there. And thank you to the audience, and I'm sure you have enjoyed this interview today. And if so, please do not forget to subscribe. Take care. Namaste.
Namaste. We hope you enjoyed this Chitti Media content. Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.